Hey, stop, are you okay? You can't be out here with babies. It's freezing. Richard Alden's voice shot through the blizzard as he slammed the brakes, heart hammering. He stared, stunned. A young black woman, shivering so hard her teeth chattered, hair matted with sleet, coat ripped in two places. Two infants pressed against her, crying in weak, rasping whimpers. Richard didn't hesitate. He flung the door open, wind slamming into him like a fist. Snow slapped his face, seared his lungs, but he moved, feet crunching through drifts as he rushed toward her. "Ma'am," he called, "let me help you." She recoiled instantly, one arm thrown up as though expecting a blow. Terror rippled through her body. Her eyes wide, frantic, locked on him with pure survival instinct. "Don't," she gasped, voice raw and broken. "Don't touch me, please don't." Richard froze, palms up. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said steadily. "You have babies with you. Please, let me help." One infant let out a choking cry, tiny fists trembling. The woman's resolve cracked. She swayed, breath catching, and collapsed forward in the snow. He caught her before she hit the ground, feeling bones far too light beneath her soaked clothes. She tried to pull away again, weak resistance, but her strength was gone. Something snapped in him then. This was not someone merely lost. This was someone fleeing hell. His mind raced. Who was she? What the hell had happened? Hours earlier, Maya had been on the kitchen floor of the Pennington estate, knees aching against marble. Mrs. Pennington towered over her, voice sharp as a blade, pearls rattling against her throat. "You think you can steal from us, you ungrateful girl?" Maya shook her head, tears mixing with humiliation. "I didn't take anything. I swear." A hard slap cut her words short. A hired guard yanked her by the arms, dragging her through the back hall. She screamed for her children. She saw their tiny faces, confused and scared, before a thick hand silenced her. "You're done here," Mrs. Pennington hissed. "You'll pay for this." Then strangers arrived, cold eyes, knowing grins, and she understood. She would not be arrested. She would vanish. Women like her disappeared all the time. No one came asking. They shoved her, twisted her arm, hissed threats in her ear. "No one here will miss you. The world won't notice." And she believed it, because for years she had scrubbed their silver, polished their floors, obeyed every word, and she had been invisible. But when a door was left unlocked, when her daughters were briefly out of sight, she ran. Bare feet on frozen ground. Two babies bundled in blankets. No plan, only instinct. Run or die. Then, he led them to the passenger side, opened the door, and helped her in. She collapsed into the seat. The twins, he placed gently in the back, digging into his emergency kit for thermal blankets. The woman hunched in her seat, arms still around herself, as if expecting the cold to creep back at any moment. Richard pulled back onto the road. Slowly. Deliberately. He knew every turn this was his mountain. After all, but visibility was near zero. "What's your name?" he asked quietly, eyes still on the road. A beat. Then, soft as a sigh, "Maya. Maya Williams." He nodded, glancing at her. "I'm Richard. My cabin's about 15 minutes out. You're going to be okay." She didn't nod, didn't smile, just stared forward, her lips trembling. The girls were quiet now, nestled in the blankets, one sucking weakly on her thumb. Richard's cabin appeared through the white haze like a lighthouse. Motion sensor lights flicked on, illuminating the porch and front steps buried in snow. And tonight, in a blizzard on a lonely mountain road, fate had tugged its thread tight. The fire snapped gently in the hearth as Richard Alden moved quietly through the kitchen, trying not to disturb the fragile calm that had settled in his cabin. Outside, the blizzard continued to thrash the mountainside, but within the thick wooden walls, the storm had softened to a distant hum. It was past midnight now, but the adrenaline in his veins wouldn't let him rest. Maya Williams sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her back straight, both hands wrapped tightly around the still steaming mug of cocoa. The twins, Amara and Nyla, lay curled together under a wool blanket, cheeks flushed with heat for the first time in hours. Maya hadn't taken her eyes off them once since they arrived. Richard watched her from the kitchen entrance, not intruding, just observing. She looked exhausted past it, really. Her skin was pale beneath the firelight, her knuckles still white from holding the cup, as if she expected someone to yank it away. He cleared his throat gently. "There's a guest room upstairs. It's warmer than it looks. You and the girls can take the bed." Her eyes darted up, startled. "No," she said quickly. "We're fine here." He hesitated. "The couch isn't big enough for all of you." "We're used to small spaces," she said, her voice flat. There was no defiance in her tone, only instinct. Like someone who'd spent too many nights being told they didn't belong. Richard nodded, backing off. "All right. I'll leave more blankets by the fire." Maya said nothing, but when he passed by her, he saw her flinch. Not much, just a slight tension in her shoulders, but enough. She didn't trust him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And he understood. He placed folded blankets in a neat pile, then returned to the kitchen, giving her space. As he busied himself wiping down counters that didn't need cleaning, his thoughts kept drifting. What had happened to her? What kind of world forced a mother with 2 infants to run through a snowstorm in the dead of night? He'd seen fear before. In boardrooms, in failed negotiations, in moments of desperation. But what he saw in Maya's eyes wasn't fear. It was survival. She suddenly spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Why did you stop?" He turned, surprised. "What do you mean?" "On the road," she said. "You didn't know me. You could have kept driving." Richard leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I saw a woman with 2 babies in a blizzard. That's not something you drive past." She held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at her daughters. Most would have. He didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. "They call you Mr. Alden, right?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Richard's fine." She hesitated, then said, "You're important. I saw your name on the Pennington News last year. Lawsuit about a clean energy project?" He blinked. "That was, yes. I didn't know anyone outside that circle followed it. I cleaned their house," she said simply. "People talk." Richard straightened slightly. "You worked for the Penningtons?" Maya's jaw tightened. Her fingers flexed around the mug. 3 years, until they accused me of stealing a necklace that never existed. His heart dropped. "So that was it." "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice brittle. "But it didn't matter. They fired me. Then, others came. People I'd never seen. Said they'd give me work, take care of my girls. But when the doors closed, they said different things." Her voice trailed off. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No one should have to go through that." Maya didn't answer. The fire popped. One of the twins stirred, murmuring in her sleep. Maya reached down instantly, stroking her back until she settled again. "How long have you been on the run?" he asked. 3 days. Her voice was dry, cracked. "Mostly hiding. I tried calling shelters. No one had space. I sold what I had left for diapers and a cheap stroller that broke the first hour." He swallowed hard. "Do you have family? Friends?" "No." She rubbed her thumb against the rim of the cup. "They all disappeared when I needed help the most. I stopped asking." "Dodd." Silence stretched between them. "I won't turn you in," Richard said. "I don't care what they claimed. I can see you're not who they say you are." She glanced at him sharply. "You don't even know me." "Not yet," he said. "But I know what fear looks like. And what strength looks like, too." She blinked quickly, then looked away. Richard stepped closer but still kept distance. "The Penningtons, they're powerful. I'm guessing they didn't want questions asked." "Doe?" Maya nodded once, slow and stiff. "Then I won't ask any tonight," he said gently. "But tomorrow, we can talk. And I'll help however I can. If you'll let me." Her eyes flicked back to him. There was no gratitude in them, just suspicion and the tiniest flicker of reluctant hope. "I don't want pity," she whispered. "You won't get it from me," he replied. "A moment passed." Maya set the mug down, pulled the twins closer, and adjusted the blanket. She looked over at him and said, "Then we'll talk tomorrow." Richard exhaled slowly. "Good night, Maya." "Good night, Richard." He turned off the kitchen light, letting the fire be the only glow in the room. As he climbed the stairs to his own room, he glanced back once. Maya was lying on her side now, both daughters tucked into her arms. Her eyes were open, staring into the flames, as if waiting for something or someone to come through the door again. The red thread was still there, tangled gently around her sleeve. It swayed slightly with her breathing, quiet and steady. In that moment, Richard knew. This wasn't a simple rescue. This was the beginning of something that would challenge them both. The storm still howled outside, but inside, something had shifted. A fragile truce had formed. He didn't know what came next, but he knew she was staying. If this moment touched you, hit like and drop your city in the comments. You never know who nearby is watching with you. Morning came slowly. The storm had softened overnight but hadn't stopped. Snow still fell in slow, determined flurries, blanketing the cabin and the trees beyond in a deep, silent white. The world outside had gone still, muffled like cotton. But inside the cabin, a different kind of quiet had settled, tense, watchful, alive. Richard stood at the window, sipping black coffee from an old stoneware mug, the kind that had belonged to his father. He always used it when he needed clarity or courage. Today, he needed both. Downstairs, he heard movement. Soft creaking floorboards, the rustle of blankets, the faint shuffle of bare feet. He glanced at the clock. 6:22 a.m. Early, but not surprising. People who had been on the run didn't sleep in. He made his way to the kitchen, footsteps careful, not wanting to spook her. Maya stood at the sink, back to him, her frame slightly hunched. She wore the same oversized sweater he had given her the night before, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Steam rose from the cup in her hands. The twins were still asleep on the couch, curled into each other under the thick wool blanket. She turned at the sound of his steps. Her eyes darted to the coffee pot, then to the front door, then finally back to him, calculating. He recognized it. She was still ready to run. "Morning," he said gently. "Maya nodded. Morning." He gestured to the coffee pot. "You figured out the old machine." "It looked like it hadn't been used in a while," she replied, eyes flicking briefly around the tidy kitchen. "I usually take mine black," he said, taking another sip, "but I think we've got some powdered creamer in the pantry if—" "I'm fine," she interrupted quickly. Not cold, but firm. Richard nodded, letting the silence sit a moment. "You sleep at all?" "A little." Her voice was quiet, but stronger than the night before. He glanced toward the fireplace. "The girls? Still out. They're not used to sleeping this warm." That pulled a faint smile from him. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed to the table and sat down, setting his mug in front of him. "I meant what I said," he said after a pause. "You're welcome here. For as long as you need." Maya stayed where she was. Her fingers tapped nervously against her mug. "You don't know me." No, he agreed. "But I know enough to see you're not safe. And I know what it means when someone's too afraid to ask for help." She looked down, jaw tightening. "I also know the Penningtons," he added. That made her flinch. "I didn't steal anything," she said, sharper than she intended. "I believe you." Her head snapped up. "Why?" "Because I've been in enough boardrooms with Preston Pennington to recognize the type. They don't accuse unless they have something to hide." Maya exhaled slowly, her grip on the cup easing. "They said I took a necklace. Said I must have slipped it into my coat when I was cleaning upstairs. I never even saw it." "Did they file a report?" "No. They just told me to leave. And then 2 men showed up at my door that night. Said they were from an agency that helped displaced workers. Offered food, housing, childcare." Her voice cracked. "But when I got in the car, they locked the doors, wouldn't tell me where we were going. One of them kept looking at Amara and Nyla in the rearview mirror like they were objects." Richard's stomach turned. "They stopped at a motel. I told them I needed the bathroom. Took the girls and ran through the back. Left everything behind." She finally looked him in the eye. "I know how it sounds, but I've cleaned enough rich people's houses to know what happens when the wrong people want you gone." He didn't say anything for a long time. "I believe you," he said again, softer this time. The heater hummed quietly beneath the floor. Outside, a pine tree dropped a load of snow with a muffled thump. Inside, something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement, maybe even the first glimmer of trust. Maya pulled out a chair and sat, careful to keep her body turned slightly toward the girls, always alert. Richard leaned forward slightly. I'm going to make some calls today. Quiet ones. I know a private investigator who doesn't ask a lot of questions unless I tell him to. Her face tensed again. I'm not trying to open wounds, he added quickly. But if those men are still looking for you, they are, she whispered. And they'll go through anyone to find us. He nodded slowly. Then we need to stay ahead of them. She looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, she nodded too. They sat in that early morning silence, coffee cooling, the girls breathing steadily nearby. Finally, Maya spoke, voice low. You have a family? He hesitated. Had. My wife, Joanna, passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Our son, Eli, is 6. He's with his nanny right now in Burlington. I'm sorry. Me too. Their eyes met again, two people from different worlds, both stitched together by grief and survival. I didn't mean to bring trouble to your door, Maya said softly. Richard shook his head. You didn't. You brought something else. She raised an eyebrow. Proof that people still fight, still protect, still love. He stood then, quietly, and rinsed his cup. I'll fix breakfast, he said. You okay with scrambled eggs? She nodded once, and as he turned toward the stove, Maya looked down at her arm. That same red thread still clung to the cuff of her sweater, stubborn and delicate. She didn't pull it off. She let it stay. The morning settled slowly over the cabin, soft gray light leaking through frosted windows. The storm outside had eased into a whisper, like winter simply catching its breath. Inside, warmth pulsed through the wooden beams, the scent of eggs and butter lingering in the air. For a brief moment, it almost felt like any other quiet Vermont morning. Almost. Maya sat on the floor beside the couch, both babies in her lap, feeding them pieces of soft scrambled egg with tender precision. Their tiny fingers curled around hers, trusting, hungry, unaware of anything but warmth and their mother's heartbeat. They cooed, smacked their lips, and pressed their faces into her chest. A picture of innocence. A picture that should never have been near danger. Richard watched from the kitchen doorway. He didn't speak. He didn't want to disturb the fragile peace. But it stirred something in him, something that felt uncomfortably like memory. Joanna sitting in their sunlit kitchen 5 years ago, their infant son wobbling on her knee, sunlight in her hair, gentle laughter shaking the morning quiet. He blinked hard, forcing the memory back into its box. Grief was a quiet ghost. It still lived in the corners of this house, and some days it stretched shadows in every room. Maya looked up, catching his gaze. For a second, she looked as though she might speak. But then her eyes dropped again, back to the girls. A wall thin, but still there slipped down between them. Richard cleared his throat. They seem better this morning. They're warm, Maya said. It's been a long time since they slept warm. He nodded, leaning on the counter. We'll keep it that way. A pause, a soft, couch's beat. What time does your son wake up? She asked quietly. He's an early riser, Richard answered. He likes blueberry pancakes. Saturdays are our pancake days. She nodded, and something flickered across her face recognition, almost longing. Then it vanished, as she adjusted the blanket around Amara's shoulders. There was a knock then, sudden, sharp. Maya's body went rigid. Both hands tightened around her daughters instantly, pulling them close. Fear flooded her face, raw and instinctive. She froze, eyes locked on the door, breath gone. Stay here, Richard whispered, voice low, calm. She didn't move, not even a blink. He stepped to the foyer. Body tense but controlled. Hand hovering near the small drawer that held a flashlight and a tucked-away emergency pistol. He rarely touched. The knock came again. Richard, a voice called through the door. It's Evelyn Langley. Snow's finally calming and I was checking on neighbors. Mrs. Langley. 83. Widowed. The unofficial mayor of the mountain road. The kind and curious type. The kind who noticed everything. Richard exhaled slowly. He cracked the door open. Morning, Evelyn. She stood bundled in a thick wool coat, gray curls poking from her knitted hat, cheeks pink from cold. Storm's a nasty one. Figured someone ought to make sure you weren't stuck up here half buried like a forgotten mailbox. Richard forced a polite smile. We're all right. Power's holding. Heat's good. Evelyn leaned slightly, trying to peer past him into the cabin. I thought I heard little voices yesterday afternoon. Didn't know Eli was here. He's not, Richard said smoothly, blocking her view just enough. Her brows lifted, reading him better than most would. Company, then? A soft sound came from behind one of the twins babbling. Maya stiffened in the living room, pressing both children against her while her eyes locked on the door like prey waiting on teeth. Richard stepped out onto the porch, shutting the door behind him. A mother and her kids got stuck in the storm. They needed shelter. Don't. Evelyn's expression shifted surprise, then concern, then something more complicated. Oh. Well, good of you. Lord knows this mountain swallowed better men than you for less weather. He nodded. They've been through a lot. I'd appreciate some privacy for them. Humph. Evelyn studied him, then lowered her voice. She all right? She looked frightened, like someone who's been hunted. Richard met her eyes. She has. Evelyn's breath caught. Oh, Lord. I'll handle it, he said. Just keep this quiet. She squeezed his arm, firm for someone so small. People with nowhere safe to go deserve neighbors who can mind their business. Relief loosened his shoulders. Thank you. And Richard? She tapped her cane gently on the porch wood. You've got that look again. What look? The one you had after Joanna passed. The look of a man remembering how to care. He swallowed, throat tight. Things change. Pain fades too, she murmured. If you let warmth back in. She shuffled away through snow. When Richard re-entered the cabin, he saw Maya standing now, rigid, clutching both girls so tightly their little legs curled against her. She hadn't moved an inch since the knock. Her breathing was shallow, her shoulders high and trembling. It was just a neighbor, he said softly. Evelyn, she won't cause trouble. Maya didn't answer, didn't relax. Her eyes were glassy, far away, caught somewhere in fear she hadn't escaped yet. He approached slowly. They're not coming for you here. Finally, barely a whisper, they always come. Richard nodded once. Not dismissing. Not arguing. Just acknowledging a truth. Carved into her bones. He crouched enough to meet her eyes, not looming, not crowding. You ran. You protected them. You survived. Now let someone else stand. Watch a while. Her throat bobbed. People don't stand for us long. I will. A beat. You don't know me. Then let me learn. Her eyes flickered, torn between disbelief and fragile hope. She sank slowly back to the couch, pulling both girls close, as if grounding herself in the only thing she trusted. Richard moved to the fireplace, adding wood with practiced hands. Flame caught again, warm and steady, filling the room with a soft glow. You can rest here, he said. I won't ask more of you today. I just want you warm and safe. She didn't thank him. She couldn't yet, but her shoulders eased a fraction, and that was enough. The red thread on her sleeve glimmered near the firelight, swaying gently as she breathed. Still there, still holding. Some threads did not fray. They waited. Outside, snow whispered against glass. Inside, survival softened just enough to breathe. Just enough to imagine, for one quiet morning, that running might someday stop. The snow picked up again by late afternoon, thick and steady, blurring the edges of the trees until the world beyond the cabin vanished in white. Inside, the light from the fireplace danced softly against the logs, wrapping the room in a flickering hush. It was the kind of stillness that made time feel suspended, a stillness unfamiliar to Maya. She sat on the floor, her legs stretched out in front of her, Amara asleep on one thigh, Nyla curled into her side. A folded blanket cradled both girls like a cocoon. For once, they were warm, dry, safe. But Maya couldn't sleep. Richard moved quietly around the cabin, not hovering but never far. He seemed to understand that stillness didn't mean comfort, not for someone who had learned to survive in silence. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He simply existed nearby. He was wiping down the kitchen counter for the third time when Maya spoke. You live here alone? He paused mid-wipe. Mostly. I come up here when I need to disappear. From what? He tossed the dishcloth over the sink. From the world. From the noise. Deadlines. Questions. Memory. Her eyes lingered on him. And people? A dry smile touched the corner of his mouth. Sometimes, not always. She looked back at the girls, running her hand gently over Amara's curls. It's quiet here. He nodded. Too quiet most days. I forgot how loud little feet could be. That earned a faint, fleeting smile from her. It didn't last, but it came. That was something. Richard grabbed a folded blanket and walked over, placing it near her. You need more. Just say the word. I'm used to less. I know, he said, but you don't have to be any more. She glanced up, unsure how to respond. Gratitude caught on the edge of distrust, like a door barely cracked open. You said your son's with his nanny? She asked. Eli. He replied, 6 going on 16. Smart. Quiet. Loves dinosaurs. Hates socks. She nodded once. Mine love bananas. Only half-ripe ones. And Nyla hoards spoons like treasure. That made Richard chuckle. I've stepped on more plastic dinosaurs than I care to admit. My coffee table's been a jungle, a racetrack, and once a volcano. Motherhood doesn't make space for clean furniture, she said, a little too softly. He studied her carefully. You miss it? She hesitated. I miss what it was supposed to be. Neither spoke for a moment. The fire crackled in the quiet. Richard cleared his throat. There's a room upstairs. Full-size bed, clean linens, private bathroom. You and the girls could be more comfortable up there. Maya shook her head. We're fine here. It's warmer, he added, and the mattress isn't from the Ice Age. I need to be close to the door. His brow furrowed. Why? She didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at him, so I can run if I need to. Richard's breath caught. You don't have to run here. Maybe not now, but people change their minds. I won't. You say that now, she said, not with bitterness, but with exhausted realism. He knelt down slowly, not too close, and placed the blanket beside her without a word. Then he leaned back on his heels and looked at her. Not through her. I don't have rules here, he said quietly. No locked doors, no obligations, no expectations. She studied him, waiting. But if you're staying, even for a little while, he continued, there's one request I have. Oh, her body tensed. Let yourself rest. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. No one had ever said that to her, not without strings. I don't mean sleep, he clarified. I mean, stop watching every shadow. You're safe here. I'll keep you that way. Maya's gaze dropped to her daughters again, as if unsure whether she believed him or if believing would only make it hurt more when the lie unraveled. You don't owe me anything, he added. Not even your trust. She nodded once. A small gesture. A beginning. He stood and turned to go but paused at the hallway. I'll make dinner in an hour. There's chicken and rice if the girls are up for it. She looked up. You cook? Barely, he said with a faint grin, but I follow instructions well. That earned a ghost of a smile from her wary, faint, but real. After he disappeared down the hall, Maya turned back toward the fire. She adjusted the blanket over her daughters, smoothing it down like ritual. Then her eyes drifted to the hem of her sleeve. The red thread was still there, caught on a loose loop. It hadn't snapped. She'd thought it would, sometime during the night, but it clung, delicate and stubborn. She touched it lightly, then let her hand drop. A few feet away sat the folded blanket he'd left for her, warm, untouched, waiting. She didn't reach for it yet, but she didn't push it away. The next morning came without Sunday. The sky outside the cabin had settled into a flat, slate gray, the kind of light that made the snow look endless. The storm hadn't fully passed, more like it had curled up outside the door, waiting for its next moment to strike. Drifts had risen halfway up the windows, burying the porch steps completely. Richard stood at the kitchen counter, flipping pancakes with one hand, while thumbing through his phone with the other. No signal, no data, no way to contact the nanny or his assistant in Burlington. Not that it mattered much, roads would be impassable for at least another day. Maybe 2. He glanced over his shoulder. Maya sat at the table this time, upright and alert, but no longer stiff. Her hair was pulled back in a makeshift bun, strands loose along her cheek. The twins were in her lap, one on each thigh, giggling softly as she tried to keep them from grabbing the ceramic salt shaker. The scene felt almost normal. "I hope you like pancakes," Richard said, flipping one onto a plate with a surprisingly practiced motion. Maya looked up, startled that he'd spoken. "I haven't had a hot breakfast in weeks." He slid the plate in front of her, then poured warm maple syrup over the stack. "Then you're due for a good one." She smiled faintly, almost bashfully, and nodded her thanks. Her hand hovered a second too long over the fork, like she wasn't sure if it was really for her. "You're not a terrible cook," she said after the first bite. Richard raised an eyebrow. "That's high praise coming from a woman who wouldn't even let me hand her a blanket yesterday. You were suspiciously polite. It felt like a setup." He chuckled under his breath, then poured a fresh cup of coffee. "I'll try to be ruder today. See if that puts you at ease." Maya glanced sideways at him. "Don't do that. You might actually be good at it." The twins babbled beside her, sticky with syrup already. Richard slid a few paper towels across the table, watching as Maya wiped their hands with a practiced gentleness. "Do they ever stop moving?" he asked. "Only when they're plotting something." He grinned. "Eli's the same way. He once built a Lego trap to catch Santa. Nearly took out my knee on Christmas Eve." Maya laughed, and for a moment, it wasn't cautious. It was clear, soft, and so unexpected that it made Richard's chest ache in a way he didn't expect. She caught herself quickly and looked down. The moment passed, but not entirely. "Is your son staying with family?" she asked. "No, with Anna, his nanny. She's been with him since he was a baby. She's more organized than I'll ever be." "Does he know about his mother?" Richard nodded slowly. "As much as a 6-year-old can. Joanna got sick when he was still in diapers. Cancer. Fast. Brutal. Martyr." Maya's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "Me too." A silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. It was shared. Richard sipped his coffee and leaned against the counter. "You know, this place. I hadn't been back here in 2 years. Not since the last winter Joanna and I spent here. After she passed, I just left it to dust." Maya's gaze lingered on the wooden beams above. "It's a good kind of quiet here." He nodded. "It's quieter now, with laughter in it." She didn't respond right away, but her fingers brushed across the top of Nyla's curls. "I never wanted to run. I just didn't know what else to do." "I don't think you ran," he said softly. "I think you escaped." A beat passed. "I didn't even grab their birth certificates," she whispered. "I just picked them up and ran." "You grabbed what mattered," he said. Maya looked at him then, full and direct, and something shifted between them, not romantic, not yet, but raw understanding. Two people carrying weight no one else could see. Outside, snow began falling again, thickening against the windows. "Roads will be closed for a while," Richard said. "You're welcome to stay." Maya opened her mouth, probably to protest, then closed it. She looked down at the girls. "I can't pay you. I'm not asking you to. I don't want to owe anyone." Richard set his mug down slowly. "Then think of it as a trade." "For what?" He smiled. "You make the cabin smell like life again." Maya flushed slightly and looked away. "Still doesn't seem fair." "It's not, but kindness rarely is." The twins began to fidget. Maya set them down gently, and they toddled clumsily across the rug toward the fireplace, flopping down in front of the warmth like sleepy puppies. Richard watched them for a moment, then reached into a nearby chest and pulled out a small wicker basket full of toys remnants from when Eli was younger. A stuffed bear, a few blocks, a faded board book. The girls descended on it like treasure hunters. Maya watched them with wide eyes. "You kept all this?" "Couldn't bring myself to throw them out." "Guess I'm glad I didn't." Maya picked up the stuffed bear and turned it over. Its ear was partially chewed off. "Captain Bobo," Richard said with a small grin. "Eli used to take him everywhere. Even tried to sneak him into preschool. Looks well loved. He's been through a lot, like someone else I know." Maya looked at him, startled by the warmth in his tone. "Do you always talk to strangers like this?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "No," he said simply. "But you're not really a stranger anymore." Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't respond. Instead, She folded the blanket on the back of the couch and began picking up syrup-sticky napkins from breakfast, dropping them in the bin beneath the sink like she'd always lived there. Richard stood still, watching her move not like a guest, but like someone trying to rebuild something broken, one small gesture at a time. And when she leaned over to pick up Nyla and cradle her back onto her hip, Richard noticed it again, the red thread still looped along the hem of her sleeve. She hadn't pulled it free. She hadn't hidden it. She just let it stay. The snow didn't stop. Not that day. Not the next. Each morning, Richard would shovel a narrow path to the woodshed and clear the porch, only to find it buried again hours later. He didn't complain. He didn't sigh. He just worked quietly while Maya watched from the window, a steaming mug in her hands, and the twins cooing softly against her legs. It became a ritual, his silent labor, and her silent watching. Inside the cabin, life found a rhythm. Maya began to move differently, less like a guest, more like someone reclaiming space. She folded towels without being asked. She swept the kitchen floor while the girls napped. She reorganized the pantry efficiently, without fanfare. When Richard caught her humming softly one afternoon, her back turned as she wiped the counter. He didn't interrupt. He just stood in the doorway and let her voice fill the room. Still, a shadow lingered behind her eyes. The way she flinched when the kettle hissed too loudly. The way her body coiled when footsteps approached from behind. The way she touched the red thread on her sleeve each night before bed, like a talisman. On the third day of the snow-in, Richard tried again to call Anna, his nanny in Burlington. Still no signal, no cell reception, no landline either. The storm had taken the old telephone wire down, and the repair crews wouldn't be able to access the mountain for at least 2 more days. He stared at his phone longer than necessary, thumb hovering over the call button that wouldn't work. His thoughts drifted not just to Eli, but to something else, something more urgent now. Maya's story hadn't left his mind, not for a second. The 2 men, the fake job offer, the lock clicking in the car, the way she'd held those girls in the snow like they were the last thing tethering her to life. He believed her, every word, but belief wasn't enough anymore. It was time to act. That evening, as Maya read to the twins from an old picture book she'd found in a dusty drawer, Richard opened the hallway closet and retrieved a small metal lockbox. Inside, a burner phone, a list of numbers, and an old business card creased, but intact. He dialed. After 2 rings, a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah? It's Alden," Richard said. "I need a favor." The voice on the other end straightened immediately. "That kind of favor?" "Yes. Discreet. Fast. Off the record. A pause. Send me what you have. I'll text what I know." Woman named Maya Williams. Accused of theft by Preston Pennington's family 3 weeks ago. Fired. Then 2 men showed up offering her work. She fled with her kids. Says they tried to take her. Another pause. "Jesus," the man muttered. "You think it's connected to the Westgate sting?" "I don't know yet," Richard said, "but I think she was almost trafficked, and I think someone with deep pockets wants her to disappear. I'll look into it." "Anything else?" "She's here, with me. Don't make any noise until I say." "Got it." Richard hung up and slipped the phone back into the box. He tucked it away behind the old camping gear and closed the closet quietly. When he returned to the living room, Maya looked up. "Everything okay?" He nodded, just checking on the firewood count. She didn't press. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Maya sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, eyes tracing the flicker of the flame in the fireplace. Richard sat across from her, not talking. Just there. "I used to dream of Vermont," she said suddenly. "Not this part. Not snow. Just peace. A little porch. Lemon trees. Something quiet." "Lemon trees don't do great in snow," he said with a smile. "I know," she replied, returning the smile for a breath. "That's why it was a dream." He leaned back in his chair. "Why Vermont?" "Because it was far from Atlanta. Because I didn't know anyone here. Because sometimes when the world tries to erase you, you pick a place where no one's looking." He nodded slowly. She looked over at him. "Do you really believe me?" "I do." Her eyes searched his. "Even if it brings trouble to your door?" Richard didn't flinch. "I've had trouble at my door before. Yours comes with meaning." She looked away, throat tightening. I'm scared all the time, even when it's quiet. Especially when it's quiet. That's how they win, he said. They already won, she whispered. No, Richard replied, leaning forward, voice firm. You're sitting here. They didn't win. The clock ticked in the silence between them. They'll come looking eventually, Maya said. People like them don't let things go. Then we'll be ready, he said. And they won't like what they find. Her eyes welled, but she blinked them clear. Why are you doing this? Because someone should have done it sooner, he said. And because maybe it's time I stopped hiding too. She tilted her head slightly. Hiding from what? He paused, then said quietly, grief, guilt, loneliness. You pick. Maya studied him. The firelight painted his face in orange and gold. He looked tired, but not broken. Alone, but not bitter. They sat there for a long time, two people surrounded by snow, by silence, by the ghosts they were slowly naming. And through it all, the red thread clung to her sleeve, as if it knew this story wasn't over. The fourth morning was fogged over with thick clouds and a brittle silence. The kind of cold that whispered of danger beneath beauty, treacherous ice, hidden under fresh snow, low visibility on winding roads, things lurking just beyond the trees. Richard stepped outside with a flashlight, scanning the property out of habit. The forest was still, too still. Back inside, Maya was in the kitchen, the girls on the floor drawing in pencil on the backs of old grocery lists. She had swept the cabin, folded laundry, and stacked a neat pile of chopped kindling by the hearth. There was a focus in her movements, a quiet busyness that looked like control, but felt like survival. Can I take a walk? She asked, without looking up. Richard raised an eyebrow. A walk? Just around the cabin. I need air, movement. He hesitated. Of course, but not too far. Visibility's low. Maya nodded. I'll stay in sight. She bundled herself in Richard's old parka and a wool cap, then stepped into the still white morning. The cold bit instantly, but she welcomed it. It grounded her, reminded her she was alive, that she had survived. With each step crunching beneath her boots, memories tried to surface. She pushed them back. The motel. The locked bathroom. The whisper of boots outside the door. The sound of her daughters whimpering while she shoved open the window and dropped them into her arms 3 feet down into mud and darkness. Keep walking. She followed the trail Richard had carved yesterday, his footsteps, wide and sure, now filled in slightly with fresh flakes. She wrapped her arms around herself. It wasn't the cold that made her shake. Halfway around the cabin, she stopped. Something was off. A footprint, not one of Richard's. Smaller, lighter, and only half imprinted. New. Hair pulse quickened. She crouched, brushing away the fresh dusting of snow. Another print, then another, leading into the tree line, then vanishing. No animal. No dragging gait. Someone had stood here. Watching, she looked around slowly. Nothing moved, but the woods were dense and the fog thick. Her breath came faster. She backed away carefully, eyes on the trees, until she reached the porch. Richard was already opening the door. You okay? Someone's been here. His face changed instantly. Where? She pointed. By the back corner. Footprints. Light ones. Watching the cabin, Richard stepped past her, moving fast. She followed him to the spot. He saw them too. Crouched. Touched the snow. Scanned the horizon. Fresh, he murmured. Maybe an hour, 2 at most. Do you think it was them? I don't know, but I'm not waiting to find out. Back inside, Richard locked both doors and pulled down the blinds. He reached for the burner phone again, dialed. Alden picked up on the first ring. I was just about to call you. Richard's voice dropped. We found tracks outside. Someone's watching. I figured as much. I ran your girl's name through a few databases. You were right. No official theft report was ever filed. No complaint. No police contact. Then why the accusation? To create a cover story, Alden replied. If she vanishes, and anyone asks, they'll say she was unstable, stole something, ran, end of story. Richard gritted his teeth. What about the men who took her? Still digging. But you're not going to like this. One of them used to work for a private security firm in Georgia. Quiet contracts. Borderline legal. The firm shut down 5 years ago. Names? Sending them now. Oh. Richard ended the call and turned to Maya, who stood rigid in the corner, clutching Nyla while Amara clung to her leg. They're close, aren't they? She asked. He nodded. But they don't know you're here for certain. Not yet. That gives us a head start. I need to leave, she said suddenly. I can't put you at risk. You're not leaving, Richard said firmly. I've done this before, Richard. I know what happens. If they think you're helping me, let them think it, he snapped, then softened. Maya, listen to me. You are not running again. Not this time. Her eyes filled. You don't understand how far they'll go. I do. I've sat in boardrooms with people who buy silence. I've been in deals where human lives were just numbers. I know exactly what kind of men we're dealing with. She looked away. Then you know they won't stop. He stepped closer. Then we won't either. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Maya whispered, What if I'm not strong enough? Richard placed his hand gently on her shoulder. You've already proven you are. The twins whimpered, sensing the tension. Maya knelt down, wrapping them both in her arms. Richard crouched beside them, his voice soft. I have a friend in the Justice Department. She owes me a favor. If we get enough, we might be able to move this above the noise. You're talking like we have time, Maya said. We do, he said firmly. We just need a plan. That evening, after dinner, Richard unrolled a map of the region on the table. He marked possible access points, road closures, vantage spots. Maya hovered nearby, pointing to where the footprint had been. They moved in sync, like soldiers preparing for siege. Later, Maya sat with the twins asleep across her lap, fingers unconsciously brushing the red thread at her cuff. Do you think this ends? She asked. Richard, still by the fire, looked up. It has to. No, she nodded slowly, but the hope hadn't yet reached her eyes. Outside, the fog pressed harder against the windows, but inside the cabin, 2 survivors had stopped retreating. That night, Richard didn't sleep. He sat in the living room's armchair with the fire dimmed to coals, a mug of black coffee cooling beside him. His eyes scanned the dark corners of the cabin again and again, windows, doors, the old staircase creaking as it settled with the wind. Every sound felt like a signal. Every shadow, a threat. Maya had taken the upstairs bedroom, finally persuaded by warmth and exhaustion. The girls slept soundly beside her in a nest of pillows and quilts. But even in rest, Maya curled inward, a habit born of months, maybe years, of waiting for footsteps in the dark. At 2:17 a.m., Richard's burner phone buzzed. He answered before the second ring. Yeah. Alden's voice was clipped, low. I've got more. And it's worse than we thought. Talk to me. Yeah. One of the men who approached Maya name's Caleb Marlowe. He's on a watch list, tied to an alleged recruitment ring in Alabama 2 years ago. Disappeared right before a raid. Richard's jaw tightened. And the other? Unnamed in every database. Ghost profile. Might be using a stolen identity. But they've been seen together in 4 different cities. Patterns consistent. Always women with limited support systems. Always single mothers. Richard rubbed his temples. Jesus. This isn't just about her. It's a network. They're targeting specific types. Young, underpaid, overlooked. What about Pennington? Richard asked. The employer who accused her. He's clean on paper. But his brother Derek Pennington owns shares in a shell logistics firm in Miami. That same firm had its trucks impounded last year in a smuggling investigation. You're saying he's connected? I'm saying, Alden replied. Maya saw something, or became inconvenient. Either way, they want her gone. Richard's stomach twisted. We need to move fast. I've contacted a prosecutor I trust. She's cautious, but interested. Get me any files you can, notes. Photos. Dates. Names. We build this airtight. We go federal. Copy that. And Richard? Yeah? Whatever you do, don't let her out of your sight. By morning, the fog had lifted, but the unease hadn't. Maya came downstairs with her girls, wearing one of Richard's flannel shirts over her sweater, the sleeves rolled up. She looked stronger today. Not because she felt safe, she didn't, but because she had begun to understand that standing still wasn't the same as giving in. They ate breakfast quietly, toast, scrambled eggs, a half-peeled banana that Nyla smeared across the table. Maya cleaned it without a word. "I talked to someone last night," Richard said gently. Maya looked up. "He's working with a federal contact. They're digging into the men who tried to take you. We might have a shot at making this stick." Her face shifted: relief, fear, disbelief, all vying for space. How long? Hard to say. "But they're not waiting around." "We shouldn't either." Maya hesitated. "I don't have anything. No papers. No proof. You have your story, and you're not the only one." She nodded slowly, gripping her mug with both hands. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a knock shattered the quiet. 3 slow, heavy thuds. Maya's body jerked. She grabbed both twins instinctively, pressing them to her chest, eyes wide with terror. Richard stood immediately. He stepped toward the door, calm but taut. He didn't open it. "Who is it?" he called, his voice firm. A pause, then a voice smooth, male, unfamiliar. "Sorry to bother you, sir. My car's in a ditch up the road. I was hoping to use your phone." Maya's eyes snapped to Richard. She shook her head quickly. "No." Richard stepped closer to the window and pulled the curtain back an inch. A man in a dark coat stood just beyond the porch, too close to the door for someone who needed help. No snow on his shoulders. No breath in the air. He hadn't been walking in the storm. Richard took a breath, forcing calm into his voice. "I'll call a tow for you." The man chuckled lightly. "No need. Just looking to come in, warm up. Won't be but a minute." Richard moved his hand to the side table drawer where he'd stashed his pistol. "Sorry," he said through the door. "We're not taking visitors." A long pause. Then, "You sure, Mr. Alden?" Every hair on Richard's arm stood up. He hadn't given his name. Not once. Richard's fingers curled slowly around the grip of the gun. Behind him, Maya was on the floor with the girls, holding their heads down gently, rocking slightly like she could disappear into the wood. "Leave," Richard said, low and even. "Now." The man laughed. "Suit yourself." Then silence. Richard counted 10, 15, 20 seconds, then cracked the door just enough to look through the outer glass. The man was gone. No prints, no engine sound, just the snow falling again. He shut and bolted the door, heart pounding. Maya's voice was thin. "They found us." Richard crouched in front of her. "We don't panic. We get ahead of this." She looked at him, eyes wild. "You saw what he did. He knew your name." "I know," Richard said, "and that means someone talked, maybe someone local. We stay sharp." Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "They won't stop. Not until they take us." Richard didn't hesitate. "Then they'll have to go through me." She shook her head. "They've done worse for less." "So have I." A beat passed, and for the first time, she believed it. The world outside had changed. After the stranger's knock, the cabin no longer felt like a sanctuary. The snow no longer muffled fear, it magnified it. Every creak of the trees became a footstep. Every gust of wind could have been breath against the glass. Richard didn't sleep that night. Again, he stood by the window for hours, backlit by the dying fire, his pistol tucked under his arm, eyes trained on the tree line. He didn't move, didn't blink much. He was calculating, preparing. Maya stayed upstairs with the twins, both girls clinging to her body like second skins. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just waited. But in the darkness, her fingers found that red thread again, still hanging stubbornly from the hem of her sleeve. She could still feel the man's voice from earlier that day. Too calm. Too confident. Like he wasn't just looking for someone, he already knew exactly what was inside the house. Downstairs, Richard finally moved. He walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer next to the sink, and pulled out a small notebook. He began writing names, dates, details Maya had told him, every piece of the puzzle she'd reluctantly shared. It wasn't just memory now, it was evidence. He copied the names Alden had sent: Caleb Marlowe, Derek Pennington, the logistics company in Miami, the recruiter in Atlanta who vanished after 3 complaints. Maya wasn't an isolated case. She was the survivor they hadn't counted on. When morning came, Maya found him there, head down, scribbling, jaw tight. "You didn't sleep again," she said softly. He shook his head. "Didn't want to miss anything." "You should rest." He looked up. "So should you." They both smiled, but it didn't reach their eyes. Maya stepped into the room more fully, one of the twins in her arms. "You're building something." "A case," he said. "We're going to give them nowhere to hide." She looked over the pages, quietly impressed. "You were always this detailed?" He chuckled dryly. "Joanna used to say I'd alphabetize the clouds if I had time." Her smile faded at the mention of his late wife. But there was no pity, only understanding. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She must have been strong. To match you." "She was," he said, "and kind. Too kind for this world sometimes." They stood there in silence for a moment, the hum of the coffee machine breaking the hush like a whisper of normalcy. Suddenly, the walkie-talkie on the counter crackled. Richard jumped. Maya froze. He picked it up carefully. "Go ahead." Alden's voice came through, faint but urgent. "We traced the plates of a black SUV spotted in the area rented 2 days ago under a fake name. Same tag was seen near Pennington's estate last month. They're close, Rich." Richard pressed the talk button. "How close?" 10 miles, maybe less." Richard's grip tightened. "I've got a federal contact driving up with a warrant. She's bringing backup, but the storm slowed them, maybe 2 hours. "Leh." Richard nodded, even though Alden couldn't see. "Understood." He set the walkie down. "They're coming, aren't they?" Maya asked. Richard didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes." Her arms tightened around the child in her hold. "Then we run." "No," he said quickly. "That's what they want. For you to panic. For you to make a mistake. But not this time." Her eyes darted toward the door. "We're sitting ducks." "We're not," he said. "We're bait, and now we know they're hungry." Within 30 minutes, Richard had activated every defensive protocol in the cabin, a legacy of a paranoid investor he'd bought it from years ago. Reinforced windows, a panic latch on the basement door, emergency lights. He even installed a small motion sensor near the drive primitive, but better than nothing. Maya helped without question. She loaded a small bag with diapers, food, warm clothes. She checked the back window, then checked it again. Her hands were steady, but her eyes flickered constantly. At noon, the motion sensor chirped. One vehicle, then a second. No sounds yet, but Maya felt it in her bones. "They're here," she said. Richard looked through a slit in the curtain. A black SUV, partially obscured by trees. No plates. The second vehicle stopped just behind it. 2 men stepped out. One wore a dark coat. The other held a clipboard, casual, practiced, like they belonged here. But they didn't. Maya's breath caught. "That's him. Caleb, the one from Atlanta." Richard's expression darkened. Then a third man exited the SUV. This one was younger, clean-shaven, smiling. He walked up to the porch, calm as a neighbor bringing cookies. Richard opened the front door slightly and stepped out. The man raised his hands. "Morning. Sorry to intrude. We're with Child Services. Got a call about an endangered minor." Richard didn't move. "You have paperwork?" The man smiled wider. "Not on me, but we'd be happy to talk inside." Richard stared at him for a long second. "Not a chance." The smile faltered slightly. "Sir, we're just here to help." "I don't think so," Richard said. "Because if you were Child Services, you'd know I called about my son being stranded in Burlington. You'd also know I'm a sitting board member on the Vermont Oversight Committee for Child Welfare." That hit like a slap. The man's smile broke. Then he said flatly, "You shouldn't get involved, Mr. Alden. And you should have picked a different cabin." The door slammed shut. Richard locked it. Maya stood at the base of the stairs, her daughters behind her, wide-eyed. "We hold the line," Richard said. 2 hours, that's all we need. And if they force their way in?" Richard glanced at the pistol on the counter. "Then we show them what a mistake that would be." Maya moved beside him. "I'm not hiding this time." He looked at her, really looked, and nodded. "I know." "Huh." Outside, the storm rolled in again, covering the tracks they left. Inside, 2 souls stood shoulder to shoulder. No more running. The next 60 minutes passed like slow-burning fuse. Inside the cabin, time warped every second, heavy with breath, tension, and expectation. Richard paced the main room, eyes moving from window to door to stairs, then back again. Maya sat by the fireplace with the twins bundled in her lap, their cheeks pressed to her chest. They didn't cry. Children had a way of sensing the weight in a room. The men outside hadn't left. Instead, they lingered, like wolves circling a campsite, waiting for the fire to die out. Richard checked the pistol again, magazine full, safety on. He hadn't fired a weapon in years. Not since that hunting trip in Montana when Eli was barely old enough to walk. But the feel came back easily. Cold steel, measured breath, one shot at a time. They're not moving yet, he muttered, peering through the slat in the window. But they're watching, calculating. Maya didn't respond. Her hand trembled only slightly as she stroked Nyla's hair. "I've done this before," she said suddenly, voice low. "Barricaded a door, waited for someone to break it." Richard turned. "Back in Georgia," she continued, not looking up. "After I escaped, the motel manager tried to stall me when I went to check out. He smiled like nothing was wrong, but I knew. I knew someone was coming. So I locked myself in the bathroom with the girls, pressed a dresser against the door, and I waited. For hours." "What happened?" he asked. "He never came," she said, "but I saw his eyes change when I left, like I'd ruined something he'd already been paid for." Richard's knuckles whitened against the window frame. "You were never supposed to make it this far," he said softly. Maya finally looked up. "That's why I have to." Outside, the men shifted. The SUV's doors opened. One of them retrieved something from the back, a crowbar, or maybe a bolt cutter. Hard to tell in the distance, but the message was clear. They were done pretending. Richard moved fast. He pulled the heavy wooden bench in front of the main door and wedged the side table against it. Then he crossed to the fireplace, reached into the stone hearth, and pressed a nearly invisible panel. With a click, a compartment opened, a narrow crawl space beneath the stairs. "Hide them here," he said. "Only if things go south." Maya's jaw clenched. "I'm not leaving you." "You're not. But if they get past me, you run. No hesitation." She stared at him, then at the hidden space, then down at her daughters. "I'll keep them safe," she said, "but you'd better still be standing when I open that panel." Richard gave a half smile. "That's the plan." He pressed the walkie. "Alden. You copy?" A crackle. "Still here. ETA 20 minutes. They moving?" "They're getting ready to breach." "Hold the line, Rich. We're coming heavy." Richard turned back toward the door. "We're not going down quietly." He shut off the walkie. Then, silence. No wind, no voices, just the crunch of snow under approaching boots. 3 sets. Richard raised the pistol, breath steady. And then it began. A heavy slam shook the front door. Once, twice. The old wood groaned. Hinges screamed. From upstairs, one of the twins whimpered. "Stay quiet," Maya whispered, rocking gently. "It's just noise, baby. Just wind." Another slam, louder. Then the glass shattered. A rock flew through the small window beside the porch, followed by a black-gloved hand reaching in to unlatch the lock. Richard moved fast 3 steps. 1 shot. The window frame exploded in splinters. A scream from outside. He didn't wait to see if it hit. He grabbed the backup latch and braced it across the inner door frame. A voice called out, "You've got no idea who you're dealing with, Alden." Richard called back, "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Men who sell fear. Men who prey on the invisible. But not today." "Last chance," the voice said. "Hand her over." "No." Another silence. Then a flash. Smoke bomb tossed through the broken glass. Richard ducked, coughing as white haze filled the entryway. He dropped low, rolled behind the couch, weapon aimed. Footsteps. Fast. Someone inside. Richard fired again twice. A body slammed against the wall, groaned, then fell. Another figure entered through the side door, somehow unlocked, maybe from earlier. Maya screamed upstairs. Richard sprinted toward the stairwell, heart thundering. But just as he reached the bottom, a shout from outside rang out. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The entire cabin froze. Voices, dozens of them, boots in the snow, orders shouted, doors kicked in elsewhere, radios crackling. Then, Clear. Suspect down. Uh, 2 in custody. Richard stood frozen for a second, pistol still raised, breath ragged. Then someone touched his shoulder. It was Alden. Bulletproof vest, badge visible. You held it, Rich. Damn well done. Richard's knees nearly gave, but he nodded. Where's Maya? He said. He turned and ran to the stairs. Maya had cracked open the secret panel. The twins clung to her tightly, their cheeks wet from tears. But Maya looked at him like he was the first sunrise after a long night. Is it over? She whispered. Richard nodded, unable to speak. She stepped forward and, without hesitation, wrapped her arms around him, not out of fear, but gratitude, relief, trust. The storm outside had finally met something it couldn't bury. The snow was still falling, but the silence had changed. It was no longer suffocating, no longer the hush of predators circling. Now it carried the muffled sounds of law enforcement boots crunching, radios crackling, orders issued with the calm precision of professionals who had arrived just in time. Maya sat on the living room couch, wrapped in a thick blanket. The twins were in her lap, exhausted from adrenaline and fear, their cheeks pressed against her ribs, their breathing slow. A young female agent with soft eyes knelt nearby, taking notes with care and patience. Across the room, Richard leaned against the hearth, arms crossed, watching the agents move with clinical efficiency. His hand still throbbed from when he jammed the window shut against the intruder, but he hadn't even looked at it. His eyes were locked on Maya. He had seen something in her when he first found her in the snow, something fierce and fragile. But today, that something had bloomed into a quiet defiance. She'd survived again. This time, she didn't do it alone. An older agent in a dark windbreaker stepped up beside Richard. You held up well, Alden. Richard didn't look away from Maya. Too well, maybe. Meaning? Richard sighed. It shouldn't have come to this. She had to be hunted down before anyone cared. The agent's jaw clenched slightly. Believe me, I've seen worse. This kind of thing is deep-rooted. It thrives in the dark. Richard glanced at him, then shine more light. The agent didn't argue. He handed Richard a folder. Preliminary results. Caleb Marlowe injured but stable. Being transported to a federal holding facility. The other 2 are already in custody. Charges? Attempted kidnapping, possession of false identification, interstate trafficking conspiracy. And that's just the beginning. Richard nodded. Good. And your friend Alden? The agent asked. His work helped connect the dots across 2 states. You might have broken something wide open. Mel. Richard allowed a breath of satisfaction to slip out, but it wasn't victory. Not yet. The real win would come when Maya could walk down a street without looking over her shoulder. He crossed the room and crouched beside her. They're gone, he said gently. And they're not coming back. Maya didn't speak at first. She looked down at her daughters, both asleep now, tiny fists clutching her sweater. Then she whispered, Is it really over? Richard hesitated. This part is, but the fight probably not. She nodded slowly, absorbing it without flinching. What happens now? She asked. The federal team is setting up protective custody. They'll find you a secure place. New identity if you need it. A lawyer. Whatever it takes. She looked at him then. And you? I'll help however I can. But I think you should decide what comes next. Her lips trembled for a moment. I don't want to run anymore. You don't have to, he said. But if you want to disappear, we'll make sure you're safe. If you want to fight, I'll be beside you. Tears welled up again, but they didn't fall. They're all I have, she whispered, looking down at her girls. No, Richard said. You have more than that now. She met his gaze. Behind them, agents filed out. The cabin emptied slowly, returning to a strange kind of peace. The storm still clung to the mountains, but the pressure had lifted. The cabin had stood, and so had she. Later that night, after everyone was gone and the girls were tucked into the upstairs bed, Maya stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a teacup. Richard watched her from the hallway, unsure if he should speak. She beat him to it. I used to pray someone would come, she said softly. Back then, when I was trapped. Just someone. Anyone. But no one ever did. Richard stepped into the kitchen, careful not to startle her. Sometimes, she continued, You get tired of hoping. He nodded. Yeah. Nah. She turned, drying her hands. So I stopped. I told myself I didn't need anyone. That I could do it all alone. And then? He asked. Then I had the girls, and everything changed. He leaned against the counter. You were never alone, Maya. You just didn't know how many of us were looking the wrong way. She smiled faintly. Do you ever wonder why we survive? Richard considered that for a moment. All the time. I think, maybe it's not just for ourselves. Maybe it's so we can help someone else survive too, he said. She nodded. Silence settled between them. Not heavy, not haunted, just quiet. Then she reached into her sleeve and pulled gently on the red thread. It had unraveled a little more during the day. It now dangled nearly to her wrist. She looked at it, then at him. It's stupid, she said, but I kept this thread to remind myself I wasn't broken, that I still had something holding me together. He looked at the thread. It's not stupid. She smiled, tired but honest. I think I'm ready to cut it now. Richard paused. Or maybe, let it stay a little longer, just until you're sure. She looked down, then nodded. Okay. Outside, the wind had softened. The snow fell gently now, like ash after a fire. Inside, the light stayed on. The next morning dawned quietly. The storm had passed, leaving behind a whitewashed world of silence and stillness. Icicles hung from the cabin's porch roof like delicate spears. The sky stretched wide and clear, for the first time in days. Maya stood at the front window, cradling a cup of hot tea. Her breath fogged the glass as she looked out, eyes scanning the woods not with fear, but with awareness. She'd lived too long in shadows to ever stop watching. But now, something had changed. She wasn't watching for someone to hurt her. She was watching to make sure no one hurt them again. Behind her, Richard was on the phone, pacing slowly. Yeah, I understand. No, we don't want press yet. Yes, she's willing to give a full statement once the girls are safe and the prosecutors have enough to act. Exactly. You've got my full cooperation. He hung up and exhaled. They've identified 3 more women linked to the same network, he said quietly, stepping closer. All missing. All single mothers. It's bigger than they thought. Maya nodded, unsurprised. I told you. I know you did. I just didn't know how far down the roots went. He looked at her, silhouetted by the morning light. Her posture had changed straighter, more certain. She was still tired. Still worn. But now she stood like someone who knew her name, mattered again. They want you to testify, he said. I figured, she replied. And I will. But not until I know my girls have a place to sleep that no one can find. You have my word, Richard said. We'll build it, brick by brick if we have to. She turned to him. Why are you still here, Richard? You've done more than enough. Most men would have handed me off to the feds and walked away. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, simply, because I couldn't live with myself if I did. She studied him. You lost someone, didn't you? He blinked, slowly. My wife. Cancer. 5 years ago. I'm sorry. He nodded. She believed in justice, in second chances. She taught me that power isn't worth much unless you use it to protect the ones who don't have any. Maya's voice softened. She sounds like someone I would have liked. She would have liked you too. The moment stretched between them, long and quiet. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was something heavier, 2 people standing at the edge of what they had endured, finally realizing they might not be alone anymore. That afternoon, a government liaison named Diane arrived, a sharp, poised woman in her early 50s with steel-gray hair and a voice that could silence a boardroom. She sat at the cabin table with Maya while Richard made tea and the twins napped upstairs. Diane laid out the plan carefully. We're setting up a protection arrangement, she said. Different name, different town, different history. Until the trial, you'll be listed as a confidential witness under seal. Afterward, if you want, we can work toward full restoration of your identity. Maya listened carefully. And the girls? They'll be protected too. But if you choose to go public later, there could be risk. This network, these people, they don't take exposure lightly. I don't want to be invisible anymore, Maya said firmly. But I want to choose when I'm seen. Diane nodded, impressed. That's fair. And smart. She handed Maya a thick manila envelope. What's this? Maya asked. Everything we have on you. Records, false accusations, deleted files, all of it. We're giving it to you because it's yours by right. And because I know what it's like to have your life taken out of your hands. Maya opened the envelope slowly. Inside were printouts, photos, notations, all the fingerprints of a system that had failed her. There was a mugshot she never knew had been taken. A file with the words, "Probationary do not hire," stamped across it. Another labeled, "Unstable domestic," flagged in red. Her hands trembled. Richard stepped forward, but Diane held up a hand. "Letter." Maya stared at the pages. A file filled with lies. With language meant to silence. With bureaucratic red ink that almost erased her. And then she picked up a pen. She scratched one line, then another, then circled a date and wrote, "False," in all caps beside it. "Good," Diane said softly. "Start there." Maya looked up, her jaw set. "I want every woman they buried with paper trails to have this too, to see it, to know it wasn't their fault." "We're working on it," Diane said. "Your testimony will help, but your voice, your truth, that's what really matters." Later, after Diane left, Maya sat with the file spread out in front of her. Richard joined her at the table, laying down 2 mugs of tea. "You planning on burning it?" he asked. "Not yet," she replied. "First, I'm going to learn every word of what they said about me. Then I'm going to tear it apart piece by piece." Richard smiled. "That's the spirit." She looked at him, serious now. "Do you think people change, Richard? I mean, really change?" "I think people survive," he said. "And sometimes, survival turns into something else. Maybe not change, but clarity." Maya exhaled. "Clarity. I could use that." "You already have it," he said. "You just didn't have anyone to say it out loud with you." She looked down at the file again, then back up at him. "I don't want to disappear anymore," she said. "I want to exist." Loudly. He raised his mug in a silent toast. "To that," he said. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds. For the first time in days, light poured into the cabin, not soft or cautious, but bold and golden and unflinching. Just like her, it took another 10 days to reach the federal courthouse. Maya had spent those days mostly in silence, studying her file, talking with Diane and Alden, holding her daughters a little longer each night before bed. Richard never pushed, never hovered, but he was always nearby splitting firewood, making calls, or sitting in the corner of the room with that quiet steadiness that had come to feel like part of the walls themselves. When they finally pulled into the courthouse parking lot, Maya sat in the back seat of the government SUV, with both twins asleep in their car seats. She wore a simple gray coat, her braids tied back neatly. No makeup, no performance. Just her truth walking on 2 feet. Richard stood outside, waiting with a thermos of coffee in hand. When she stepped out, he gave her a nod, quiet approval, without words. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. "No," she answered, "but I'm going to." Inside the courthouse, the air felt heavy with formality. Everything smelled like cold marble and recycled heat. Voices echoed across high ceilings. Diane led them through the private entrance reserved for witnesses under protection. No press, no onlookers. Just fluorescent lights and guarded glances. They passed through 2 security checkpoints before being taken to a small, windowless waiting room. Beige walls, folding chairs, a ticking clock. It felt sterile, but also safe. Maya sat with the girls in her lap, bouncing one knee gently while the other twin gnawed on a plastic toy. Diane sat beside her, reviewing notes. "You'll speak for about 15 minutes, Diane explained. "You'll be behind a screen for privacy, but the judge, prosecution, and defense will hear your voice. No cross-examination today, it's just a deposition to determine whether charges should be formally escalated." Maya nodded. "I understand. And if you're not ready, we wait. No pressure." Maya turned to her. "There's pressure, Diane, but I'm not scared of it anymore." Diane smiled. That's the part they never expect. When it was her turn, Maya walked into the deposition room alone. The court had arranged a simple partition, opaque and curved, to shield her face. There was a microphone in front of her, and a glass of water. Her name was announced softly. The court officer swore her in, and then the questions began. "Miss Williams, can you state, for the record, what your employment was under Mr. Pennington?" "I was hired as a live-in maid and caretaker for his property outside Birmingham," Maya said calmly. And did you have a written contract? No. Everything was verbal. I was told not to ask too many questions. Were there others employed there? Yes, 3 other women. None of them worked longer than a month. Why do you think that was? Maya took a breath. Because we weren't meant to stay. We were meant to be disposable. Silence followed her words. The room shifted. Even the air stilled. Can you elaborate? She looked straight ahead. He accused me of theft after 2 weeks. He told me I'd be turned over to police, unless I agreed to settle the debt with a contact of his. That man showed up that night. I ran with my girls. I never stopped running. And when you say contact, what do you mean? I mean someone who was already waiting, who didn't blink when he saw I had kids, like it was normal, like it was planned. The prosecutor's voice softened. And your daughters, were they ever in immediate danger? Maya's voice cracked for the first time. They're always in danger, because I'm not supposed to exist. Because women like me are easy to blame, easy to sell, easy to forget. A pause. And yet you're here. I am, she said, because someone finally listened, because someone believed me. Who was that? Her voice was barely a whisper. Richard Alden. Lou. A beat. The judge's voice broke the silence. That will be all for today, Miss Williams. Thank you. Maya stood slowly. She didn't feel victorious. She felt raw, exposed, like every wound had been peeled open, aired, and left to sting. But also something else, lighter. Outside the room, Richard was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall like he had nowhere more important to be. She walked up to him, her face unreadable. Well? He asked. I told them. He nodded. I know. She stared at him. Do you think it mattered? I think it did, he said. And even if it didn't, it changed you. She hesitated. That's what scares me. What? That maybe I don't know who I am without the running. Richard looked at her with the kind of stillness that spoke louder than words. You're someone who stopped, he said. That's enough for now. That evening, they returned to the safe house, an old but cozy farmhouse Diane had arranged near the edge of town. The girls fell asleep early, worn out from the unfamiliar day. Maya stood on the porch, wrapped in a heavy cardigan. The stars blinked in the sky like cautious witnesses. She could still feel her voice echoing in that courthouse room. Richard stepped outside beside her, holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one. To the loud ones. She raised her cup. To the ones who listened. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't need fixing. Then Maya said, I think I want to be seen again, just not as a victim. Not as a broken girl with a tragic story. Richard turned toward her. What do you want to be? She looked out into the dark. Real, she said. Just real. He nodded slowly. You already are. And for the first time in years, she believed that might be true. A week after the deposition, Maya received a letter. It arrived by courier, no return address, sealed in an unmarked envelope. At first, she thought it might be another legal form or court update, but when she opened it, she found a single handwritten page, no letterhead, no signature, just 7 lines written in tight, masculine print. You think you've won, but we've been doing this long before you could walk. Women like you always break eventually. Watch your back. Watch your girls. Some things don't end in court. They end in silence. We don't lose. She stood still, the paper trembling in her hand. Richard found her on the porch, gripping the letter so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her eyes didn't move. She was frozen in something colder than fear, something deeper, more familiar. He took the letter, scanned it, and didn't speak for a long time. Then, with eerie calm, he folded it once and tucked it into his coat pocket. We're not reacting, he said. We're responding. There's a difference. Maya swallowed. They know where I am. No, he said. They're guessing. It's a bluff. She looked at him. You sure? I'm not sure of much anymore, he admitted. But I know men like this. Power is only useful to them if it keeps you afraid. You're not afraid anymore. So now, they're panicking. Maya didn't argue. She just turned and walked inside. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay beside the twins in the makeshift bed, holding them close, whispering prayers she hadn't dared to speak aloud in years. The kind of prayers that didn't ask for miracles, just for time, for safety, for one more day. By morning, she was resolved. "We go public," she said to Richard over breakfast. He looked up from his tablet. "What? No more hiding, no more code names, no more secrecy. If they want to come for me, let the whole damn world see them try." Richard set the tablet down slowly. "You understand what that means? It means I stop being a ghost. It also means they'll paint you as unstable, a liar. They'll drag your past through the mud. Every mistake, every moment of anger. Are you ready for that?" Maya took a long sip of coffee before replying. "I've been buried under their lies for years. I'd rather drown in the truth than keep breathing in silence." He studied her face. Something in her had sharpened, hardened, but not in a bitter way. It was a fire that had finally found its shape. "All right," he said. "Then we do it your way." That afternoon, Richard called in a favor. He had once mentored a young journalist, Ellie Morgan, now a respected investigative reporter for The Atlantic. She had integrity, reach, and more importantly, the courage to listen. When Ellie arrived at the farmhouse 2 days later, she came alone, no cameras, no entourage, just a notebook, a voice recorder, and eyes that didn't flinch. "I'm not here to sensationalize," she said to Maya. "I'm here to help people understand what happened, how it happened, and why it keeps happening." "S1," Maya nodded. "Then I'll tell you everything." For hours, they sat on the back porch while the girls napped inside. Maya told her story, not the condensed version, not the digestible one, the real one. The years of working in homes where she was invisible, the constant threat of being replaced or accused. The night she was cornered. The escape. The cold. The cabin. The gunshots. And then her voice began to tremble, not out of fear, but from the effort of holding everything inside for so long. "I didn't run because I was guilty," she said. "I ran because no one would listen." Ellie's pen didn't stop moving, but she looked up often, meeting Maya's eyes. "And now?" Maya looked toward the woods. The wind moved gently through the trees. "Now I speak so no one else has to run." When the interview ended, Ellie stood, closed her notebook, and said, "This will upset people." "I hope it does," Maya said. "I hope it upsets them enough to do something." 2 days later, the article was published online. Invisible Wounds, the story of a maid who wasn't supposed to survive. Within hours, it went viral. By evening, major news outlets had picked it up. Activists called for congressional hearings. Whistleblowers came forward. And Maya's face, strong, unflinching, was everywhere. But not everyone was pleased. Threats came, again. Nasty comments. Emails. Old photos of her from college twisted out of context. An anonymous voicemail left in the middle of the night. "We warned you." But this time, Maya didn't flinch, because for every threat, there were 10 voices of support. Strangers who thanked her. Women who whispered, "Me too." Men who admitted they'd looked away too long. And one morning, an envelope arrived not from a stranger, but from one of the other women who disappeared after working under Pennington. Inside was a single note, handwritten in blue ink. "You weren't supposed to survive, but because you did, I might." Maya held that note for a long time. It was the first time she cried in weeks. Not from fear, from hope. It had taken over 2 months to reach this day. The courtroom was colder than Maya expected. Not physically, it was well heated, polished, professional, but the air held a clinical chill, as if truth itself were fragile and had to be preserved in glass. She sat at the witness stand in a charcoal gray dress, hair pulled back in a neat bun. No jewelry, no makeup, just her name, her voice, and the weight of everything she had carried. The courtroom wasn't packed, just a smattering of observers, legal aides, and press with notebooks resting on their knees, but the moment still felt enormous. On the opposite side of the room sat Caleb Marlowe, the man who'd cornered her outside the Pennington estate that night, and 2 other defendants. They looked far less dangerous in tailored suits, almost forgettable. That was part of the danger. Richard sat in the front row behind her, hands folded. His face was unreadable, but Maya knew what it had cost him to be here. Diane had warned her, this wasn't the trial yet. It was a federal pre-hearing, a judicial review to determine whether the trafficking charges should proceed to full prosecution. But for Maya, this felt like the moment that could turn the tide. The prosecutor stood, a tall, composed woman in her 40s with fire in her eyes. "Miss Williams, can you please describe, in your own words, what occurred on the night of January 12th? Maya leaned toward the microphone. "I was working as a live-in housemaid. I'd been employed for about 2 weeks when I noticed irregular behavior, locked doors, visitors at strange hours, and other women leaving the house in tears." She paused, keeping her voice steady. "Then I was accused of theft. The accusation came without proof, without police. Instead, I was told I could repay my mistake through a private arrangement. That night, Caleb Marlowe came to the house. He wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to take me." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. "And what did you do?" "I ran," she said. "I took my children, my twin daughters, and I ran through the woods in the middle of a snowstorm. I believed, with everything in me, that if they caught me, I would disappear, like the others." "Others?" "Yes, I wasn't the first. I saw other girls quiet, scared, undocumented. They never lasted more than a few weeks. I asked once where one of them went, and was told she'd moved on. I don't believe that anymore." The prosecutor turned slightly toward the judge. "Your Honor, the witness has now confirmed what we have suspected, that the Pennington estate was functioning as a recruitment point under the guise of employment. These women were filtered, targeted, and handed off to traffickers under threat of false criminal charges." Defense counsel rose quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. These are emotional claims without hard proof. We request the court dismiss the witness's testimony as hearsay and circumstantial at best." The judge, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a strong voice, held up a hand. "The witness has direct experience with the accused. Objection overruled. Continue." The defense attorney, unfazed, approached the stand. He was slick, well-dressed, and smiled in a way that made Maya's stomach turn. "Miss Williams," he began smoothly, "you've had a difficult life, haven't you?" Maya met his eyes. "You could say that. You've worked under multiple employers. Some might say you've had trouble holding down a stable job." "I've had trouble staying in places that weren't safe," she replied calmly. The attorney nodded. "And you've also experienced emotional trauma, correct? Loss, instability, housing insecurity?" "Like many women," she said. "That doesn't make me a liar. And you're aware that some would suggest your perception of events might be shaped by past trauma?" Maya didn't flinch. "I remember every man who touched me without permission. Trauma didn't make that up." The courtroom quieted again. The attorney adjusted his tie. "And you're claiming, under oath, that Mr. Marlowe here was part of a coordinated trafficking ring?" "I'm not claiming it," she said, her voice sharpening. "I'm surviving it." He smirked, as if amused. "Surviving, that's a powerful word." "It is," she replied. "You should try it sometime." The attorney paused, then sat down. The judge glanced at the clock, then at Maya. "You may step down, Miss Williams." She rose slowly, her knees shaky, but not from fear, from adrenaline. As she walked past the front row, Richard stood, just briefly, as if to silently escort her back to her seat. Outside the courthouse, the wind was brisk but not punishing. Cameras had begun to gather at the bottom of the steps, held at bay by temporary fencing. Maya stood beneath the stone archway and looked out at the gray sky. Diane joined her moments later, holding a folder of notes. "You did well," she said. Maya didn't speak for a moment. He smiled when I said the word survive, like he didn't believe it. "That's why it matters that you said it," Diane replied. "This is how they lose. Not all at once, but piece by piece." They stood quietly together. Then Diane added, "The judge is allowing the charges to move forward. Full trial, federal level. You open that door, Maya." Maya blinked back, the rush of emotion rising in her chest. "And now I have to walk through it." "No," Diane said. "We all do. But you lit the path." "No." Later, in the car on the way back to the farmhouse, Maya rested her hand against the window, watching the city roll by. There were still battles ahead, still testimony to give, still scars to be named out loud. But today, she had faced the system that once erased her, and she had made them look her in the eye. The farmhouse was quiet when they returned. It was the kind of quiet that clung to walls and settled into floorboards, not from absence, but from reflection. The twins were napping upstairs, their soft breathing like lullabies through the baby monitor. Outside, the sky was heavy with the hush of early spring, thick clouds hanging low, as if the world were holding its breath. Maya stood in the living room, staring at the fire Richard had built in the hearth. It wasn't particularly cold anymore, but the flames felt necessary like a ritual, a way to remind herself that warmth could be made from nothing but matchsticks and patience. Richard stepped inside with 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one wordlessly, then sat in the chair across from her. "They're moving fast," he said. "The DA's office is opening a full federal trafficking indictment against Marlowe and the others. Multi-state, multi-victim." Maya nodded, wrapping her hands around the cup. "And Pennington?" "He hasn't surfaced," Richard said, "but that might be a good thing." She arched a brow. "Good?" "He's scared," Richard said, "or being protected. Either way, his silence speaks volumes." Maya exhaled through her nose. "I used to be afraid of silence. Now, I understand it. Silence is a choice, but so is breaking it." Richard looked at her, thoughtful. "There's going to be fallout. For a long time. You've disrupted a system that was never meant to be touched." She met his eyes. "Good." A pause settled between them. The fire crackled softly. Then Maya reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out the red thread. It had frayed even more over the last few weeks, now just a thin loop tied loosely around her finger. "I kept this through everything," she said quietly, "as proof that I was still tethered to something, that I hadn't floated away." Richard nodded. "I remember." She looked down at it. "I think it's time." He leaned forward slightly. "To cut it? Don't aim it." He blinked. "Nam it?" She looked at the fire, voice steady. "Every time someone tried to reduce me to silence, to labels, to a file folder, I held this. It reminded me I was Maya Williams, not a case, not a problem, not a statistic, just Maya." Richard sat quietly, absorbing that. "I didn't get to choose much," she continued, "but I can choose what this means. I can choose what I take forward." "And what do you take forward?" She looked at him. "My name." That night, she sat at the small desk in the guest room. The girls were asleep. Richard was downstairs finishing paperwork. The silence was warm, not hollow. In front of her sat a blank notebook, a gift from Diane, with leather binding and gold-embossed initials on the cover, M.W. She picked up the pen and began to write, but not about the trauma, not about the trial, not even about the fear. She wrote names, the names of every woman she remembered from those houses, the ones who came and went too quickly, too quietly. Names spoken in hallways, nicknames traded in whispered conversations while folding laundry, faces burned into memory. She wrote them one by one, not for evidence, not for court, for memory, because so many had vanished without even a paper trail. But here, on these pages, they would exist. They would not be forgotten. She filled 5 pages before her hand began to shake. Then she closed the notebook, placed her palm over it, and whispered, "You're still here." The following day, the first news interview aired. Maya had agreed to sit down with Ellie again, this time on camera. No disguises, no shadows. Just her face, her voice, and the truth. The segment opened with her walking through the woods near the farmhouse, holding her daughter's hands. Then it cut to the interview, where Ellie asked softly, "Why now?" Maya looked directly into the camera. "Because silence almost killed me," she said. "Because it's still killing others." The interview swept across America. Morning shows replayed it. Podcasts quoted it. Churches, women's shelters, advocacy groups, they all began sharing her words. And then something remarkable happened. Women started writing in. Letters, emails, voice recordings. Some were anonymous. Others came with names long buried. Survivors of similar schemes. Employees who had seen strange things. Families who had lost daughters and never knew why. Maya sat on the porch every afternoon, sorting through them, answering what she could, holding space for what she couldn't. She didn't try to save anyone. She just listened. And sometimes, that was more powerful than justice. One morning, Richard stepped outside holding a small envelope. He handed it to Maya, his expression unreadable. "This came to my office," he said. "No return address." She opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. It showed her standing outside the courthouse after her testimony, mid-step, mid-sentence, with her daughters flanking her sides. Her expression was unshaken, defiant. On the back, scribbled in unfamiliar handwriting, were the words, "You're not supposed to look this free. You're changing the game." Maya smiled slowly. "Who sent it?" Richard asked. "No idea," she replied. "But I think it was meant as a warning. Do you feel warned?" She looked out over the fields, sunlight catching her face. "No," she said. "I feel seen." Later that week, she received a call. It was the Department of Justice. The official federal trial was being scheduled. They wanted her as their star witness. Not just for Marlowe, for Pennington. She hung up the phone slowly, pulse steady. The girls were playing in the next room. Richard was fixing the kitchen sink. The world was spinning, soft and steady. And she was ready, not because she wanted revenge, but because she understood something now. Survival wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. The federal courthouse in D.C. was different, grander, more imposing than the one back home. White marble steps stretched wide across the front, framed by tall pillars that gave the building an almost temple-like air. Cameras lined the sidewalk. Reporters murmured into microphones, their eyes scanning the entrance for movement. Maya stepped out of the black SUV wearing a navy blue dress and long coat. Her hair was neatly pinned, but loose enough to move in the breeze. In one hand, she held a small notebook. In the other, a simple silver ring that Richard had given her before they left the farmhouse. For strength, he'd said, not as a promise, just as a reminder. The courthouse doors opened for her, and this time, she didn't flinch. Inside, security was tight. Federal marshals, metal detectors, the hum of officialdom. Diane walked beside her, calm and composed, carrying a thick file of evidence and witness lists. Richard wasn't far behind, his presence grounding everything around her. Today wasn't a deposition. It was the trial, and she wasn't just a witness. She was the reason the trial was happening at all. The courtroom buzzed quietly as attorneys prepared their opening statements. Pennington sat at the defense table, a polished mask of calm on his face. Expensive suit. Perfect posture. A man used to controlling the narrative. But for the first time, he wasn't the one being listened to. Maya took her seat behind the prosecution's table. When her name was called, she stood and walked to the witness stand with slow, measured steps. The air didn't feel cold anymore. It felt expectant. "Miss Williams," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court how you first came to work for the defendant." Her voice was steady. "I answered an ad. It promised a live-in position, good pay, child care assistance." It sounded like hope. "And what did you find instead?" "A trap." Maya spoke for nearly an hour, guided by questions. Her voice never rose. She didn't cry. She didn't pause for pity. She told them about the false accusations, about Marlowe, about the night she ran barefoot into a snowstorm with her daughters in her arms, about the cabin, about Richard. And then she said the thing that changed everything. "I am not here because I'm the only one. I'm here because I was the only one who lived." The courtroom stilled. The defense attorney, older this time, careful, practiced, stood slowly. "Miss Williams," he said, "you've been through a terrible ordeal. We're not here to debate your pain. But isn't it true that prior to your employment you had financial struggles, housing instability, and prior disciplinary marks on your employment record?" "Yes," she answered calmly. "Would you say those things affected your perception of the situation? Perhaps made you more inclined to misinterpret the employer's intentions?" Maya looked at him evenly. "No, it made me more inclined to recognize danger when I saw it." The lawyer smirked. "Isn't it possible, Miss Williams, that you overreacted to something routine, a dispute over a missing item, for example?" "No," she said. "Because when I said no to the accusation, I wasn't offered a legal route. I was offered a man with a truck and a price." She turned her gaze toward the jury. "They didn't want me to leave angry. They wanted me to leave quietly." Silence followed. The defense sat down, subdued. The judge called for recess. Outside the courtroom, Maya found a moment alone in the hallway, leaning against the cool marble wall. Her palms were sweating. Her body buzzed with adrenaline. But her heart was steady. Richard joined her quietly. You were brilliant, he said. I was honest, she replied. Same thing, he smiled. She looked up at him. You think they'll convict him? I think you gave them every reason to. My. She nodded, then turned her gaze out the hallway window. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does, Richard said. But somewhere, a woman is reading about you today. And she's saying your name out loud. Not his. Maya blinked hard, swallowing emotion. Saying it like it means something. It does, he said. It means she might try. 2 days later, the verdict came in. Guilty. On all counts. Maya was at the courthouse when it was read, seated beside Diane and Richard, holding the notebook of names in her lap. The room didn't erupt. There was no applause. Just a quiet, seismic shift like the floor beneath them had exhaled for the first time in years. She didn't cry. Not until she was outside, under the sun, and a woman in her 60s approached her with tears in her eyes. I had a daughter once, the woman said. They said she ran away, but I know better now. Thank you. Nye. Maya hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that said we both survived something even if it wasn't the same thing. That evening, Maya returned to the farmhouse for the last time. The girls ran to her, giggling, arms open wide. She swept them into her embrace, holding them as if her very breath came from them. Richard stood by the porch railing, hands in his pockets. So what now? He asked softly. Maya looked out at the field. Now we build, she said. She had plans, real ones. A center for survivors. A foundation to fund legal aid for women silenced by fear. Work that mattered, rooted in her name. The girls would grow up knowing the truth, not just the pain, but the fight. Not just the scars, but the healing. And Maya would never be invisible again. She took the red thread from her pocket one last time. Then, with calm fingers, she tied it around a tree branch by the porch. Not as a tether, but as a flag, a signal. She had survived. She had spoken. She had won. The story of Maya Williams teaches us a powerful truth. Silence protects the oppressor, but courage sets the oppressed free. Her journey reminds us that justice often begins with a single voice refusing to be erased. In a world that profits from fear, Maya chose truth. And in doing so, she didn't just save herself, she lit a path for others to follow. We are reminded that survival is not weakness, it is strength. And telling your story, no matter how broken or painful, is an act of